Passing through the veil of mystery, seeking answers no one is brave to ask. This is Bound to Truth.
Hey everybody, welcome to Bound to Truth. This is Chris Lopez. Hope everybody's having a great weekend so far. It's been a bit of a windy day, crazy day. Actually, not crazy. Done my cleaning, cooked my food, took care of my chickens, all that such. Anywho, again, really hope everybody's having a great day and being blessed. It is a beautiful weekend, and it's great to be alive. So today I'm going to talk about Jake Barber. He is the second, I would say, more whistleblower per se. I know Lou Alzano came out and a few other whistleblowers, but this one's a little bit more intense in the realm of what David Grusch has done when he came back out a couple years ago, which I talked about last year in the podcast about David Grusch. And it's a pretty incredible story. But before we get into that, obviously, how can you reach us? Like I said before, boundtotruth34@gmail.com. Definitely feel free to send an email to share if you want to be a guest on the podcast, to share your story about anything and everything of both either supernatural, paranormal, UFO experience, cryptids, all that sorts, and so forth. You can also reach us and see us on Facebook, Spotify, Buzzsprouts, Apple, and YouTube, and other platforms that are available as well for you, even on Amazon. So yeah, definitely hit that subscribe button. The more shares, the more likes, builds a bigger platform. Like I said before, the platform is yours. So we're going to be talking about Jake Barber, like I talked about, and I'm going to give you a little bit of summary about who he is. Actually, he's going to talk about more of who he is. But basically, who is Jake Barber? His claim about an egg-shaped craft, which I'll show a video on, which is pretty incredible, that he captured and has filmed. And then also the emotions and feelings that he got from it, which is quite spectacular. That has been talked about before with both physical capture of a non-human intelligence craft, but also the emotional and spiritual aspect of it, which has been a really big topic talking around in the UAP community, especially if you talk about with Stephen Greer. He's been talking about that for many, many years. But it is quite interesting where that fine line is between those when it comes to both the scientific aspect as well as the spiritual aspect, which I have some thoughts about that, which I'll kind of try to conclude at the end. Again, not truth, just thoughts and theories. And then I'll also share a little bit about Chris Bledsoe, which is going to be another podcast episode. I've been debating about doing that. And the reason I mentioned him a little bit is because of his experience with the craft and these entities that are very, very similar to Jacob Barber. And also, in addition to that, too, Jake's going to talk about the psionic program within the military, which is pretty much the psychic program of communicating with these beings and so forth, which is really not, I mean, for me, not too shocking, maybe to you and everybody else out there who's not into the subject, but because there has been a lot of testing both with the Nazis, the Soviet Union, even the military of the U.S. government regarding psychic warfare. And honestly, this conversation that Jake talks about really amps up what that looks like. Not just psychic warfare, but communicating with these, again, quote, non-human intelligences. So that being said, I'm going to go ahead and start the video for you guys. And so you get a bit of an intro of Jacob, and we'll pick it from there.
My name is Jacob Barber, and for the last 30 years, I've worked for the U.S. government and its private partners in both an official capacity as an enlisted man in the United States Air Force and in a non-official capacity for the broader intelligence community as a contractor. Over the last 3 decades, my work has been very diverse and has included the recovery of downed UAP of non-human origin. I am pleased to share that as of a couple weeks ago, I have fulfilled a promise to our friend David Grusch by getting myself into a SCIF with Congress, and I have provided top secret SCI testimony on the subject matter of UAP. With this behind us, I'm pleased to be at a place where I can share information with the public. The type of information I can share will be limited by my DOPSR restrictions and personal restrictions I have set in order to protect the privacy and quality of life of my friends, family, and colleagues.
Tell me that story. How did that happen?
Well, in high school, I was 17 years old. I was prospected into a program, an enlistment program. It was a guaranteed enlistment or guaranteed training enlistment program contract for a specific career field at the time called combat control. Career field is still called that. The contract was unique at the time. It was a 10-year commitment to Air Force Special Operations. I finished my screening for that program in September of 1994. I shipped off to Air Force Basic Training. Upon completion of that, I went to a place known as Operating Location Hotel. This was Air Force Special Operations selection. I completed selection roughly 4 months later and then entered into what is known as the pipeline. The pipeline is approximately a 2-year specialized training schedule where you go to a number of schools. At a certain point in my pipeline, I was approached by some individuals who had a discussion with me and convinced me it might be a good idea to consider becoming an airplane mechanic.
Was that to be your cover?
Yes.
Because I notice your DD-214, which is your release discharge document from the US Air Force, which you've provided us, it says you're an aerospace mechanic.
I was a mechanic. I spent a lot of time on the flight line at Pope Air Force Base and an obscure maintenance shop known as the Dash 21 dual rail shop. I spent a lot of time there in my cover capacity, and I worked hard.
You're constrained very heavily, aren't you, by what's called a Defense Office Pre-Publication Security Review.
Correct.
And that's called a DOPSR for short.
Yes.
And if you accidentally or deliberately reveal information that they've told you that you're not allowed to reveal, you can go to jail for that.
That is correct. Yeah, they've created quite a landmine of words to avoid.
So there are certain agency names, certain designations in the military that you're not allowed to reveal or use.
Yes, and for good reason.
Let me clarify something though. You were trained as a top special operations soldier.
Upon completing that, I was given orders to Pope Air Force Base, where I spent a lot of time actually working in a maintenance capacity in an obscure maintenance shop known as the Dash 21 dual rail shop. My time outside of that was spent in any number of clubs, you could say. I was a member of many clubs where I got an opportunity to do a lot of interesting training.
You were given extensive special operations training.
I trained in things like survival. I was in parachute club. I was in scuba club. I was in weapons club. I was in pilot club. I even was in Spanish club. I was in entrepreneur club, paramedic club.
So they were fully training you for whatever that COVID role was going to be.
Nobody was training me. I was there on my own free will, out of my own interest, and trained in a number of clubs.
A mechanic, but you were training yourself in a whole range of different skills. And I noticed your DD-214 document, it actually shows that you've got a sharpshooter's achievement.
Yes. Yeah.
So how many mechanics have a sharpshooter's achievement?
Not many. I will say that the standard for marksmanship in the Air Force is pretty low, but I did qualify as expert marksman in a number of small arms.
Right. And you've also, I noticed, you're able to talk about the fact that you earned a commendation for the use of combat medical skills to help save the lives of 2 men in a horrible accident.
Yeah, that's the interesting thing, is every once in a while my club skills would show up in the ordinary Air Force. Part of what goes on when things are heavily compartmentalized is often the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing. And so serving in my capacity as what is known as an OPFOR, an oppositional force, by the time I was immersed in my club training, I soon began to be deployed as what's known as a red team member. I became a red team expert.
So an opposition force person, what do they do? Just explain to me what you do.
So OP4 is the bad guys. So an OP4 is a utility team, and that team's utility as in pressure testing or stress testing the effectiveness of what are known as blue forces, which are the good guys. So OP4 is trained to deploy their own intuition and innovation in order to make the regular soldiers' lives hell. And that was where I was uniquely qualified and was deployed in that fashion in a number of real world scenarios and training scenarios.
So there you go. That is intro Jake Barber. He's got a lot under his belt. Gosh, he was in a lot of clubs. Geez, sounds like more clubs than high school. Anyways, so basically he's a very much legitimate soldier in the Air Force. And also in addition to that, I don't think he mentioned this, which I'm going to read a little bit. He was a combat controller, which I kind of find very interesting what a combat controller is. So like, what is a combat controller, right? So I'll read the definition of what a combat controller is. In addition to his many skills in the military and the things he's been given with his training with the Air Force, just the military in general. So here is what a combat controller is. So, an Air Force combat controller are highly trained special operations forces who deploy into hostile environments to establish airfields and assault zones. They also provide air traffic control services. What do? Establish airfields and assault zones, provide air traffic control services, which I already said that already, conduct fire support, provide command and control, conduct counterterrorism, provide humanitarian assistance, conduct special reconnaissance. So that's just the accolade, a definition to his many accomplishments. And so really interesting. And I really wanted to share that. I know it may be a little bit boring, but I think it's important to understand the foundation of our person who's whistleblowing and understand his background and his involvement with this craft retrieval. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move on to another video that is going to talk about his recovery story of this craft that you decide for yourself if it is legitimate or not, and get back here to you with that here in a moment.
But tell me about the moment when you realized that you were involved in a retrieval of non-human technology, alien tech.
So it became very clear the first time we recovered something that was non-human in origin that it was precisely what we were dealing with. Our communications changed. Our communication process and procedure was modified. It was also clear to everyone on the team that what we were dealing with was something that was unexpected versus expected. And then just visually looking at the object on the ground, you could tell that it was extraordinary and anomalous. It was not human.
How close did you get?
Well, I was a helicopter pilot, and I operate with 150 foot to 200 foot long line. So I got within 150 feet of this object.
What did you see?
I saw an egg, a white egg.
How large was the object?
I would say approximately 20 feet, plus or minus a little bit, about the size of a large SUV.
Did it have any seams?
No.
What? And it was pure white?
It was like pearly white, like a metallic pearly white, best I could assess.
I mean, what you're describing sounds like something out of a TV show.
Yeah. Well, fortunately, I'm going to share some images with you, and you can see one of these flying in the sky if you like in broad daylight.
So you actually saw it in the sky before?
No, not this one. But in our new venture, we've already begun work, and we're capturing sensor data of the exact same craft flying in the sky.
How did you know that egg-shaped object was non-human in origin?
No, visually, after seeing all kinds of things in my past, it was clearly something that was ridiculously looking. It's inconsistent with anything I'd ever seen before. I can also tell you that the reaction by my team, who was very experienced, was atypical. we changed we modified our entire process for recovery that night. Our communication process changed. We all knew we were dealing with something extraordinary. And in addition to that, it has also been verified by me, by high-ranking members of the UAP task force, that what we recovered that night was in fact known NHI craft.
So, what time of day or night was it when you came across the octagonal object, the 8-gon?
We did recovery on that both day and night.
So talk me through it. What happens? You're in your chopper?
Yeah, I'm in my chopper.
What sort of chopper?
At the time it was a Bell 212, which is the same as a UHN1. It's a twin-engine, twin-bladed Bell helicopter.
You're flying at night?
Flying at night, yeah.
What time at night?
Oh, God. I don't remember. Like midnight.
Have you been given any pre-flight briefing?
I'm the one who would be given the briefing, but we are given a loadout on the particular object. That when you're flying an external load, we designate two different sites. One's called the drop site, one's called the pick site, you could say. The pick site is where the payload is that you're flying in to pick up. As you're making your first trip into the pick site, the payloads are already rigged and manifested for you to prepare them for flight. When you're en route to that object, you're given some basic information like weight estimates, size estimates. And there's two objects that I'm here to talk about. One was the egg, the other is what we called an 8-gon. The 8-gon was essentially a flying disc with what looked like eight delineated sections when looking down. And I can tell you what it looked like when looking down because that's primarily how I saw it because I'm a helicopter pilot. We did recoveries with the 8-gons. There was more than one that made its way to the ground on this particular operation. And the recovery was done at night, and then more was done in the day. Because of where we operate, sometimes things can make their way into the steep terrain. The terrain where we operate is the highest mountain range in the whole continental United States. And so the decision was made to wait till daylight to recover some of the object or some of the material that was brought down or made its way to the ground that night. During the recovery of the object at nighttime, I make my way in the helicopter from where we configure the line and we fly to where what we call the pick site. There's two locations. We designate them pick site, drop site. Drop site at the delivery location. We have a crew both at the pick site and the drop site on the ground. The pick team configures the cargo for flight.
So whatever it is, the craft is sitting in a sling waiting for your helicopter.
Yeah, it's saying we have these things called pumpkins, which are like rubberized bags or containers. And from my point of view, it was covered in a pumpkin, at least from the bottom and the sides. This is one of the most profound experiences I've ever had in my life.
Okay, so he gave a really great description about his recovery in the unit and what they did, and how they prepped for it. Obviously, this is not the first time that the military has done any type of retrieval of a craft, either crashed or intact. So what I'm about to show you is the video that he gave to Russ Corthart in regards to what the craft looks like. Definitely looks like something from like the show back in the late 70s, early 80s, Mork and Mindy. You know, they call it the Nanu craft, which is kind of funny, but it's an egg-shaped craft, kind of a pearl-like object that is very metallic. But I'm definitely going to put that on right now for you, and definitely want to get your thoughts and see what you think. So there you have it. It's a very interesting object that he was able to record and capture. Very egg-shaped. And it's not the first one either. There's ones reported in Antarctica and so forth around the world. My question is why egg-shaped? You know, I remember this movie called Angel Heart with Mickey Rourke and Robert De Niro, and Robert De Niro played this Lucifer character, and he was eating an egg in front of him and saying how the egg is supposed to be the symbolism of the soul. Now, maybe I'm looking too deep into that, but I quite find that interesting of why an egg-shaped craft. What is that? What's the purpose of that? Is, you know, I mean, he talked about like this octagon, eightagon type of craft, right? So if you could do this technology, does it matter what the shapes are, or do the shapes have symbolism into it? So it's, again, I'm kind of reaching a little bit, but I do think it's interesting how the egg represents the soul in some of cultures, right? And so I'm just curious if there's any connection with that. And in this next segue, Jake's going to talk about his emotional experiences carrying this object and what he felt through that. It is an interesting story, which will lead me to Chris Bledsoe regarding his experience as well. That is very similar to Jake Barber. So I'm going to get that video propped up. Definitely have you guys have a listen to it, and definitely get your thoughts. And yeah, here we go.
This is one of the most profound experiences I've ever had in my life I'm about to share with you, so bear with me. This is, for me, when it became clear. As I get closer to this pig site, I start feeling odd. I start feeling extremely emotional. And the closer I get, the more the emotion starts to overwhelm me. And
what do you feel? What's the emotion?
I feel a sense of my mother. I don't know how else to explain it. I feel this intense hybrid of sadness and happiness and beauty, and song. And it was very disruptive to me because I had a very practical responsibility at the time to operate a helicopter in the mountains at night. And I began wondering what was wrong with me. It was late. Am I just stressed? Am I tired? Am I marinating in cortisol and estrogen? I don't know. But as I came over this object for the pick, there was this overwhelming sense of emotion.
What's it saying? The object. Tell me what you're feeling.
Like I said, it was an overwhelming sense of sadness, happiness.
Is it your feeling? Are you suddenly having a mental breakdown on the job?
No, I felt like something connected with me. I felt like something had tuned in to me and my soul and was providing me some sense of guidance on what to do and how profound what I was doing was. And it was so overwhelming that I began to cry. And
I can't imagine crying at night time with night vision goggles is the healthiest way to fly a chopper.
no, it is not. And then I'm confused as to why I'm crying at the same time. And then do I abort the mission? So I just did my best to focus on my particular cues when doing this type of work. And I got the load hooked up and I began flying away. And once it was just me and that object in between the pick and the drop site, there's about 20 miles in between, I felt like something was inside of me. I felt like I was possessed by the most beautiful spirit I'd ever been possessed by. And
was it loving?
It was loving. But there was a sense of sadness at the same time. And
Had you ever had an experience like this before?
No, no, it was a very feminine energy. I'll tell you that. It felt like the spirit of God, but not in any masculine sense that I had ever felt. It was like, again, the feeling of my mother, and my daughter, and beauty. And it wasn't like a soul, it was like a frequency that I was connected with.
Was it scared?
I don't know if it is a thing. I'm still trying to figure out why that happened. I don't want to say that because I have a pretty good idea of what's going on now. And whatever that force was since that night, it has stayed with me. And as crazy as it sounds, it's what's guiding me now. And it's what's providing protection for me.
It's changed your life.
It's changed my life.
So as you can see, he had a lot of emotional experiences with this object and what he was carrying. And a lot of it really, as you heard, really dealt with a mothery figure, a feminine divinity, per se. Which is interesting because the reason I'm going to talk a little bit about Chris Bledsoe, and I encourage people to research Chris Bledsoe and his experience with the UFO craft. I think it was back in the 70s or 80s. But it was basically him and a bunch of work buddies and his son were out doing some fishing and they're going to do some camping. And basically came to this object that was this big light type of object, and he was surrounded by these beings, and he was talking about a feminine lady, a divinity and light of love and nurturing and so forth. And I kind of keep thinking about, like, you know, me being raised Catholic, the Virgin Mary and that type of aspect. Now, am I saying that it's the Virgin Mary? I'm not saying that. It's a big reach. Now, you know, I've talked before about these beings and so forth. Are they demonic? Are they interdimensional demonic? Or what we call demonic is actually interdimensional? Is this feeling that Jake Barber has legitimate? You know, is it something that he talked about frequency, about what he was feeling? Is that real frequency, or is that something that's just projecting to create, what do you call it? Like a false, like a predator with a prey, right? It dangles this bait for you to be curious and comforted by it until it attacks. You know, is this something like that? I have no idea. But it is definitely interesting how this subject, when it comes to UFOs and UAPs, what we're going to call it, and the spiritual aspect of it too. I mean, I mean, the subject UFOs is not old, right? It's been around for quite some time, or it should be not new. It's been around for quite some time. But what's new is the spiritual aspect of it and how people are feeling. Because usually, I remember watching a show like Sightings and Unsolved Mysteries, where people get, you know, you get the Betty and Barney Hill story, where people have these crafts come down, they abduct them, they do the experiments, and they take off, right? And that's pretty much it, right? It's all about experimentation and scientific and just war of the worlds type of mentality type of thing. But now we're in this whole new crossroads of there's a spiritual aspect to it, which I kind of find intriguing. And that's where I kind of find, like, is it spiritual? I mean, are these beings from a different planet? Are they interdimensional? Like, could they be on our own playing field in a different dimension, right? So again, a whole different rabbit hole. It is definitely interesting to hear his story and testimony. And again, like I brought up with Chris Bledsoe, and I'm curious about people out there who may feel the same thing. You know, I'm curious to hear people who may have abduction spirits where that could be that type of feeling as well. I have no idea. I haven't really researched too much into people's aspects of some type of emotional spiritual connection when it comes to the experience with these non-human intelligence beings and so forth. But again, quite fascinating on a different platform and realm where we're at compared to just being typical alien abductions. So, definitely a mind blower for me, and I can go with theories all day, but again, time is short, and so am I. So the next part we're going to talk about here is the psionics program that the military has established over many decades, and this is basically the part where Jake will talk about how we have recruited people not just in our country but around the world to communicate with these objects and these beings. So more than just the psychic warfare that's been around during the Cold War and so forth, like I talked about in the podcast, but this is definitely a new type of direction of how psionics work. So I'm gonna have him explain that a bit. Have you watched the film? Again, love to get your thoughts on top of that. And so here we go.
Is a psionic?
A psionic person is someone with a predisposition for extral, temporal, you could say, abilities and sensitivities. Someone who has a fantastic intuition.
What did you discover the psionics were being used for in the program?
In the program, there was certainly a desire to explore the idea that perhaps UAP could be summoned, could be communicated with, could be controlled, and could be persuaded to land, all by deploying people with psionic abilities to interface and communicate with the UAP.
And did you see that happen?
Yes, I did.
So there were people who were purportedly psionically gifted who were brought into the program.
Yes, there were.
Where did they come from?
They come from all over. They're not, and all over, I mean, from outside the United States as well as in.
And how are they detected? How are they picked?
I don't really know. You'd have to ask somebody else.
I'm told that there are particular indigenous communities around the world, Native Americans, people in different third world countries, who apparently have enhanced psychic abilities that are real.
Sure. I think most people could grasp the idea that perhaps people that are from other cultures, our culture leaves a lot to be desired when we look at the contaminants that exist in our food, contaminants that exist in our drugs, and contaminants in our culture. Some of these contaminants, it turns out, aren't great for your spirituality or your consciousness or your psionic abilities. And so those who live a particular lifestyle or live in a culture where they have a more natural or direct way of life with nature and their surroundings seem to, that within those groups of people, there's a little bit higher demographic than there typically is for those with a psionic ability. So these people are sought out and are used to contribute to the research that might be going on with the psionic.
I want to put something to you.
Yeah.
I've spoken myself, you haven't told me this, but I've spoken myself to people of Native American background, Indigenous Americans, who say that this is a particularly popular thing for recruitment from the program to happen in Indigenous American communities.
Yes, I know that for a fact.
There are also people from countries in the third world where these abilities are recognized and not treated with stigma as we do in the Western world.
Yeah, there is no stigma. In fact, if there's any stigma, if you're the one who's not playing along, you might be the outcast in those cultures.
So the irony is that part of your discovery inside the program is that there genuinely are people who can actually make a mental, spiritual connection to a technology.
Yes, 100%.
So, wow. A psionic program. that is been around for quite some time to communicate with these beings. However, considerably not new. If you look at cultures, they talked about Native Americans and so forth and communication. I like how Jake talked about our food and what we put inside our bodies, how that chemically affects our abilities. That's definitely a possibility. Actually, it is not, I wouldn't say it's a possibility, it's a fact, right? I mean, we know, right? If we, have too much alcohol, if we smoke too much weed, how it affects our mental state and our ability to be enhanced to our surroundings. I'm curious if the food that we have does the same thing to limit the abilities that we have been born with. I've heard people talk about, especially with children, because they're not as impressionable, right? They're still very new to their atmosphere. They have a higher sense of awareness compared to us as adults because we've been experiencing life through so many different areas and they haven't. So they're definitely more keen and more, I would say, what's that word I'm looking for? Unaffected regarding to what is being presented in our artificial world to them. And I think that's very interesting. It kind of brings me back to, with missing people, missing children. Is it because, I'm not trying to create some conspiracy about human trafficking, but I'm wondering if that's something a black project is going on, is trying to find these kids' abilities. I mean, actually this could be another podcast, is Project Montauk regarding children being kidnapped. This is in New York, regarding to try to enhance their psychic abilities because they are so innocent and prone, right? And so forth. But I really find it fascinating that this is what is being used to addition to these non-human intelligence. Again, this is where I kind of lean more towards, is it actually alien or is it something interdimensional and spiritual, right? And I mean, like I said, I keep thinking about Project CERN, about open portals. I don't know. Again, you probably don't know what that is. Google that. It's interesting regarding that. But I'm curious what the end game is with all this. What are we trying to do? What are we trying to accomplish? What is our goal with these black project things are going on? Yeah, we have these crafts that crash. Why doesn't disclosures come out? Is it concern about destroying religion and society norms? What's the deal? Is it because it can, if we have this opportunity to have free energy, where we don't have to depend on gas and coal and all that stuff? Again, I'm not against that stuff. I get it, that it can hurt our economic, financial stability when it comes to the markets. I have no idea. I'm just curious. I'd love to get you guys' thoughts out there. What's the end game? What is the point of it? Why hide? Why the cloak and dagger stuff behind it? Why the black budget projects are happening? Our own tax dollars that are going out to fund these things, right? So what's the point of it? Why wouldn't we try to expose this opportunity that our world is bigger than just what we have, that we see with just our eyes, that is something that can be potentially more spiritually enigmatic and just beautiful, and that our world can be totally open, where we can definitely broaden our horizons and hopefully create more peace and continuity with each other as human species, right? So yeah, that's my thoughts. That's all I have to say. I mean, well, I have more to say. But anyways, guys, I really hope you enjoyed this podcast. I hope you enjoyed the video and the film. And if you haven't seen any of this stuff, I'll definitely put a link down regarding the News Nation. It's about over 2 hours long. So I try to get to the meat and potatoes, to the things that really that I think are really pertinent to what this claim is. But there's a lot more to it that I'll definitely put a link into, because like I said, it's over 2 hours long. Before this podcast, like I said before, how can you reach myself and John? boundtotruth34@gmail.com, Spotify, Apple, Buzzsprouts, what else? YouTube, Facebook. Definitely hit the subscribe button. The more you guys subscribe and follow us, the more we build a big platform to give you a voice to share your experiences. Like I said, we're all in it together. There's no reason to have division. We are a species that's unified. I don't care what religion, race, or creed. We all have the same, we believe the same way. We have the same organs, right? So definitely want you guys to come out and subscribe for sure. And yeah, as usual, God bless, take care, and see you on the other side. Good night.